Hello, everyone. Everyone. And everyone means people who we don't know, people who are current students at the Baron Brown Studio, people who are going to be students at the Baron Brown Studio, people in the industry who are interested in what this is about, be they agents, managers, casting directors, producers, writers. Welcome to the world of Meisner motivation. This Friday, we're going to do it every Friday for an hour. Some weeks we may do two. Today's topic is emotional preparation. Emotional preparation is very exciting. People love it because people who are actors love to be emotional. And directors like to zoom in for that teardrop, whether it's Grey's Anatomy or it's a soap opera or it's an A-list movie with Meryl Streep. People love to have the imaginative connection to deep feeling. It is affecting, it is motivating, it is inspirational, and it brings an audience into feeling. But there are dangers with emotional work. There are dangers that can make you seem like you're trying to feel. So let us first start by answering some things that people last time asked about. Last time people asked about how can you get involved in Baron Brown? We talked about superlative activities and people were very engaged and they would chat in and write and say how to get, well, there's an online class enrolling now for people who do not live in our area. And that would continue when we are back in person. And that could be an international student. That could be a student in another state. That could be pretty much anybody. So there's an online class that is enrolling right now. There's also a class about July or August that is called the 6-week intensive. And the 6-week intensive is going to be taught by D.W. Brown and Elaine Williams and Lisa Melillo. And the 6-week intensive is going to begin July, August, September, and we will see. And that is another class. But right now, within about 3 weeks, we're going to start an online class. So if you want to jump on board this extraordinary opportunity during a time when many people feel disconnected and connect, raise your talent up, really learn something transformative and get ready for the future, go ahead and do it. Call Baron Brown. Info@baronbrown.com. info@baronbrown.com. Well, I've answered that because a lot of people said, how can I get involved? What can I do? Is there a class I could start? So I'm answering that. Let's get right into emotional preparation. Last Monday, only a few days ago, we talked about the superlative activity. And the superlative activity is something that people do. A sexiest strip, a maligning attack. These behavioral actions that people do organically elicit emotion. And that's the best kind of emotion, emotion that is elicited from doing. But then there's a whole category of how to get emotional that isn't from physical or behavioral doing. And that is where emotional preparation comes in. Now, emotional preparation is taught by different teachers different ways. There's an entire school of emotional preparation that is based on Lee Strasberg's work, and there are many teachers in the world that are offshoots of this, and it's called sense memory. And sense memory has to do with recalling, usually recalling something traumatic. So let's say you were unlucky enough to have, I don't know, somebody beat you. Tragic, horrible. But on those days that those violent things happened, you imagine and recall the pattern of the rug, the smell, the breeze on your neck. It would literally be recalling the event and eliciting the feelings. Sanford Meisner did not feel that that was effective or healthy. He felt that if you tried to remember trauma, it wouldn't be as accessible, because if you've ever been in a serious trauma, a lot of times people can't remember a darn thing. You're in a car crash, you're in a ski accident, gosh forbid a plane goes down. How do you remember? There's a Band-Aid. Call it God, call it biology, but there's a disassociation that happens when trauma happens. So trying to remember an exact event, it's not that easy to recall the feeling of it because you can't really access it, because there's a little band-aid, a scab that forms that protects you from constantly feeling the pain and fear and trauma of it. So Sandy said, you know what? I don't think this is the most healthy thing to keep ripping the band-aid off. Then he said, if you're going to rip a band-aid off that's a super trauma, you've been attacked, abused, better do it with a psychiatrist or a therapist or a counselor or a priest or a rabbi, because an acting teacher should not be ripping off your psychological band-aid. Acting is therapeutic, but it is not therapy. And you get into dangerous areas when you try to make acting therapy, and the teacher becomes the psychiatric god. And there are some people who say that Lee Strasberg was the psychiatric god to Marilyn Monroe and others, and that it made them overly dependent. Rather than learning an autonomous way to work and act, they got to lean on that coach, that mentor. In fact, I think they used to say that Lee Strasberg's nickname was the rabbi. A little water wets the whistle. So it's imperative that Meisner looked at sense memory, which was Lee Strasberg's approach after he came back from meeting Stanislavski in the 1920s with the rest of the group theater. And he said, no, I don't think you should recall trauma. When you rip the Band-Aid off, you can't access emotions. And when you rip the Band-Aid off, it's not healthy because you are re-wounding yourself. And when you rip the Band-Aid off, Meisner felt, you can only be literally as emotional as the event was. So you're limited. You are limited by the exact way that someone broke up with you, scared you, terrorized you, walked over a boundary. You are limited to that. Meisner came up with an invention. He's an inventor. He's a creator. And his invention was called emotional preparation. And emotional preparation is a brilliant approach to emotionalizing an actor. And what would you use emotionalizing an actor for? Well, since you're not physically doing an activity and you're not behaviorally doing an action, you would be self-seducing, leading yourself gently and evocatively into an emotional state. This is tricky business because it's very easy to fall into forcefully attacking yourself to get emotional. Come on, cry. Come on, cry. Everyone else in the class is crying. It's very easy to fall into tension. I'm gonna get emotional. I'm gonna get emotional. It's very easy to get self-conscious. Oh my God, I'm feeling something. What are those wet drops on my eyes? It's very easy to stop you from connecting you to the imaginative situation because you're distracted by your emotions. Wow, I thought I felt a feeling. Are we in a scene about breaking up? I'm too busy thinking about my emotions. That's called emotion consciousness. So Meisner took a hold of something that we all do naturally. It's something that we all do naturally. We dream. If we didn't have dreams at night, apparently we wouldn't be healthy. You may not remember your dream, but somewhere you're dreaming. And he said, if you dream at night, we also have a dream in the day, which is called a daydream. And how many times have you been sitting in a room and thought, I'd like to kill this person. What a bore, bragging, going on, and you just have a fantasy where you're like dragging them through the street and throwing them down and you don't stop that daydream until you're like triumphant. Yeah, you braggart, you braggadocio, I'm king of the world. Maybe you look at a beautiful girl or a handsome fella and your mind starts thinking about, this would be fun. And you are imagining a fantasy and you don't stop till you're in ecstasy. Oh, I've had my peak. The peak would be better known as an orgasm. An emotional orgasm would be having a daydream that finds its way with you. And you are not controlling and leading the daydream. It's like an internal movie that you're the star of, and it is taking you through a path to an escalation with an organic climax. I'm not trying to use sex, but sex is a primitive, raw reality that is human, and it's accessible to most people, and it's not very mental. So it relates. People can understand that when you go to sleep at night and you have a sexy dream, boys may wake up with the result of that when they turn 13. So I'm not trying to be too graphic, but I want to be clear. I want to be clear what we're talking about. The daydream that Meisner wanted actors to utilize as a technique for emotionalizing could be used for an entrance. I'm entering into this scene and my parent just passed away. I have to enter crying. How am I going to enter crying? What am I going to do? Just put an onion under my eyes, rip my nose hairs and my hair out of my head, look at a picture, listen to sad music, break my watch? What am I going to do to get myself emotional? Also, emotional preparation Meisner used for interpretive work, because when you get into character interpretation and script analysis, you not only plan each thing you're going to do, and we talked about that on Monday, you actually preset each thing you're going to feel. Feeling, doing, feeling, doing, feeling, doing. And it's a orchestrated, choreographed, emotional topography that you are traveling in 3 dimensions. Presetting emotional preparations prior to actions can be 20 or 30 actions in one scene. It initiates in the training with explaining how, in a simple improvisational exercise, someone comes into a domestic exercise. That means 2 people live together, and one of them is coming home to be alone after an event has happened. And the event is what they write, like a writer writes. But the daydream is something even more personal that they know will elicit the proper depth and complexity of emotion that will bring the circumstance to life. Because in life, you're not going to get all scripts that you wrote. You have to know that when you read the circumstance of a play by John Patrick Shanley or Stephen Adly Guirgis or Arthur Miller or Chekhov, you have to find out, how would that make me feel, what that author, writer wrote? And when you find what it is, you say, what would make me feel that way? Now, it could be a circumstance in a play that you're getting married, and you say, boy, that would make me feel like I was suffocated, like they were putting me in a box and closing the top of it. Marriage, oh, I can't breathe. And don't a lot of guys feel that way? Maybe girls too. And if you wanted to feel that suffocation, maybe only maybe only you feel that way when you get in an elevator. You're a little claustrophobic, only you know. And you do a daydream while you're awake, starting from a great point of interest. When the elevator stops and it's crowded around you, and you start not to be able to breathe. And in this imaginary daydream, you do not control it, you do not lead it, you do not watch yourself and wait for emotion. It's like you're on a river and it's just taking you down this way and that. And you don't try to direct it to a climax. You just play the moments and you don't try to get to the result. And not to go back again to a sexual metaphor, but you have to play the moments if you want to get a result. You can't just be thinking climax, climax, climax. Your partner's going to think you're pretty boring because you're not going to be available to experience anything. And you're never going to be able to do the different things in response that your partner leads you to. This will be our most sexy lecture. We won't have as much sex in our other lectures, so enjoy. This being led down the winding river means that every time that you do this daydream of being locked in an elevator, sometimes it'll end up with you screaming, let me out, let me out. Sometimes it'll end up with you crying on the floor. Sometimes it'll end up with you standing stone-faced with drip all over you. You don't want to try to get to the results. You want to start from an initiation point that grips you, that engages you, that holds your imagination and makes you feel like you want to live out that fantasy. That daydream that you're locked up in an elevator can be used for a lot of different circumstances that have to do with fear, something that would make you feel claustrophobic, something that would make you cry, you feel so hemmed in. There might be many more things than the marriage day. It could be any number of things, showing up the first day on a job and you lied about your qualifications and now they're going to ask you to do the thing that you said you already knew how to do, ride a horse. Finding the truth of the circumstance is elicited from an emotional, psychological intuition that you developed when you learned first-year work, where you explored your human self, and it gave you a window into the souls of all human beings. But once you find what that truthful circumstance emotional is, it's your obligation to find it in yourself. You're not going to stand in one place and keep saying, I'm getting married, I feel claustrophobic, I'm getting married, because guess what? Maybe you were elated the day you were getting married. Maybe you were relieved the day you were getting married. Maybe you celebrated with tears of joy the day you were getting married, but not this character. This character can't breathe the day he's getting married or she's getting married. So this is what connects an actor to entering into a scene with an emotional depth that comes from offstage, And it's not by indicating it, faking it, trying to act it, talking yourself into it. It's from truly eliciting in an easy, relaxed, patient way, an organic ride that you take, that you initiate at a point of such interest for yourself that you let it just take its way. A daydream may go cold on you. You may use it for 10 years and you may have to do a new daydream because we grow old, we grow different, we grow more mature, we are less sensitive to the things we were. So daydreams can be changed. That means you're not limited to the exact event, so you can constantly change them. A daydream should not be all real. It shouldn't be the real elevator you got stuck in last week. It should be part imaginary and part real, or all imaginary. But if you actually literally are trying to remember something, now you're in sense memory, now you're in emotional recall, now you're in a different method, the Strasberg method. This is the Meisner method. And by the way, everything that came from Stanislavski is a method. The definition of method acting is acting which requires your imagination and your personal, emotional, inner life and experiential journey. It isn't external. I'm not acting it outside myself. It's internal. So those method actings, Meisner and Strasberg, both require you to live through something. The difference is Meisner wants you to get to your emotional life in a way that may not distract you and make you emotion conscious and may not bring you back into a historical. I remember I went to a Strasberg teacher because I'm always interested in trying different things because I'm an actress. And I did a sense memory, and after it, I couldn't leave his office. Very talented teacher, well known. I couldn't leave his office because guess what? Me remembering a trauma so traumatized me that forget acting, I couldn't get outside the office to get to my next appointment. Remembering traumas, remembering literal experiences is limited because it can only emotionalize you from that exact event. It can be distracting. It can put you in the past. It can make it a scab that's being ripped off that's not healthy. It can make it limited in its access because you can't even reach the literal thing. So when you are sensitive to an elevator or a helicopter or being locked in a short little room or anything like that, it's going to elicit emotion the minute that you start the emotional preparation. The minute that you start that emotional preparation, it's going to elicit. And if you let it have its way till you're at that peak, that orgasm, that escalation, you will end up at the emotional point that then you will transition into the scene. Not only am I terrified and I can't breathe, but I'm getting married. The transfer of the emotion into the river, the tributary into the river, is a transition that you take that feeling and bring it over. As you practice emotional preparation over and over and over again, you will get to the point where you're able to start a preparation and emotion will be elicited. So if you're in a vital acting class, you might find that when it's first introduced, it takes you, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 minutes. And it may not even get you that emotional when you first start trying it at all. And maybe the next time you get emotional is when you're with another actor. The last place it will probably show up will be when you're performing in front of people. It's something to do before you go to sleep at night and when you wake up in the morning. It's something that you elicit from yourself in a manner which then is a practiced, relaxed, without force, without results, free-floating experience. But eventually, even people who say, you know, I have trouble getting emotional, it really bothers me. If you don't worry about it, if when you're doing it, you don't let your body get more and more tense, cutting off the feeling, but you stay loose and relaxed. If you do it just for the explorative freedom of seeing where it goes without any sense of pressure, if you pick things that you find are personally, really emotionally of engaging psychological interest to you, slowly but surely you'll become more accessible to your feelings. And then you will not only be using it to enter, but when there's something inside a scene, the phone rings and your brother says your mother passed away. How can that preset moment elicit all that feeling? Emotional preparation. Maybe the door opens, it's your ex, and you hate him, he cheated on you. How can you burst into tears and fall right into a rage? I mean, your real acting partner you really like, he's a lovely guy, and he's married, and you would never have dated him. But you have preset an emotional bomb that is set to go off at the cue, and the cue is him opening the door, you opening it and seeing his face. What if character interpretation and script analysis tells you, you can't just plan what you're going to do. You have to know how you feel before you do it. How do you know you're going to pull your hand away from the fire if you don't know it hurts you and is burning? Emotional preparation is a fantastic and key tool of acting, but feeling is not acting. So you can sit down right now and cry your little butt off, take a picture of it, take a video and send it to every casting director in the world. And they're going to say, what's this? She's just crying. He's just yelling. They're just laughing. Acting is doing. Remember we talked about that on Monday? Acting is doing. Acting doesn't have anything actually to do with feeling. Feeling makes doing affecting. But you can have a whole movie with someone crying and not know what the story is because you can't tell what they're doing. And it is what people do that makes it clear. Let's say right now, I stop passionately, emphatically, joyfully, New York, slightly Jewy, turned Christian style, emphasizing, teaching, quirky me doing my thing. Let's say this character, Joanne, that you're playing, is doing a Zoom, and this is how she's doing. Now let's say that I just do this for the entire hour. Or this. going to watch that? Well, start to be what Sidney Pollack, who taught at the neighborhood class with Sandy Meisner and became one of the great directors of all time, said, looking for understanding from your colleagues, from your peers, not just your grandmother, not just the general population, but people who know what the craft is. Because the craft of acting is deceptive. Remember, we talked about disguised virtuosity. People who dance that fall down, everybody knows she was supposed to jump on his arm. She fell on her butt. Every time I watch the Olympics and they're skating, oh no, look, she fall again. No hiding that. When you're an athlete, boom, strike out, boom, strike out. But people can't tell when you're striking out as an actor because acting requires speaking and everyone speaks. So very few people know what actions are. Very few people know what interpretation is. And sometimes when people are doing brilliant acting, since it doesn't look like acting, people can't tell. So you look to your peers who are educated in the art form. I know when I go to a museum, I don't ever try to tell my best friend who's a painter what the paintings are good or bad, because I just like the color green. Green. Because I just like something sort of poetic. And she might tell me, Joanne, that's not a well done painting. And let me explain exactly why. To really appreciate an operation, you have to have gone to medical school. Otherwise, you just watch and go, looks good to me. They got a knife. They've opened up the person's body. Looks important. How do you know they're not killing the person? How do I know what is great art if I have no education that gives me the insight? And how do people know what is great acting? It's difficult. They say everybody's entitled to their opinion. Of course they are. But Sidney Pollack said, when you are looking for understanding of your art form, go to the people that have an understanding, your small group of peers. And that's our Meisner world. That's our world. This emotional preparation can create an inner life that can be preset for when you open a door and see someone, for when you get the bomb that's dropped, that you've been fired, or that you've been hired, or that you're pregnant, or that he's divorcing you, or that your mother is sick. It can be for an entrance on stage, and ultimately it should precede everything you do in a scene. Practice with the same meticulousness as a ballerina at the bar, tirelessly working on her feet. For the love of it, ask a ballerina how much money they make. It's wealth of spirit, love of art, joy of performance. So what I say to you is emotional preparation is a very critical part of the training in Mr. Meisner, but it is not what makes acting clear, and it is not what is required in acting. It simply adds a little golden nugget to your acting. So when they do a close-up on you, we have an upcoming film masterclass, when you get a close-up, and that's what really is so fantastic about life, you'd never know what life is going to do, and terrible things can be extraordinary things. Terrible events in the world have refined people and brought out their depth of humanity and generosity and taught them empathy. Well, being on Zoom means that you can look at people, and looking at people shows their tension, their muscularity, their articulation. So much is so when you are looking at someone and they are emotionally alive, it can be very affecting in a close-up where someone is really doing something, breaking up with someone they love because they don't want them to know that they're sick and they don't want that person they love to have that burden. That's a scene that we do called Bill of Divorcement. And when that emotion comes up because the person is really doing what they say they're doing, remember the definition on Monday? Actors are people who do things truthfully under imaginary circumstances. Why didn't Sanford Meisner say actors are people who say things? Why didn't he say actors are people who feel things? He said actors are people who do things under imaginary circumstances. And if you know why you're doing what you say you're doing, it will bring its own emotion with it. And what about when you are entering on stage or exiting off stage, or you have a moment in the scene that requires an emotional reaction, or you need to create a relationship where you are not just looking with love at the person or chasing them around, grabbing their butt, but the minute the door opens, you melt. And it's so authentic and so alive in you, and so true and so connected in you, that it is engaging to the audience through an entire movie where they believe that you were in love with this fella or this gal, and that they broke your heart, and the whole movie is the love story of you getting them back. We are going to do relationships next Monday. And relationships are critical. I'll let you know Monday or Friday. Usually we're doing this once a week on Friday. When you do relationships, that is absolutely, absolutely incredible. Why? Because everything great in acting is based on what is great in life. How do you feel about your mother? She's an angel. How do you feel about your father? He was a bully. How do you feel about your ex? He tortured me. How do you feel about your current beau? He's my dream. The living relationships we have are what stories are written by. Death of a Salesman. I just did that monologue for a casting director because they're taking monologues as generals. And we at Barry Brown are doing lectures, teaching classes, doing one-on-one makeups with our students. And we are also sending out resources every day. Daily resources are going to be coming out. And some of them are about auditions and jobs and all kinds of classes. The audition I did from Death of a Salesman is really about a father who has disappointed his sons, and he kills himself because he's ashamed of himself, that he could not be more in the world's eyes and their eyes. That's not a play, Arthur Miller's great play, about a circumstance. Oh, this is about someone who tries to sell a suitcase, someone doesn't take it, then he can't make the sale. This is a play about a father whose sons feel that he betrayed the American dream of success and power and fame, and it destroys them. All great acting, they'll tell you, is character acting, which means it's going to require planning and interpretation. But all great acting material is relational. Just as the great thing in your life is your family. At the end of your life, are you going to jump up and remember every guest star you did from NCSI? Or are you going to be calling out for your cousin or your mother or your sister or your husband? What are the most important things in people's lives? Their children, their family, good or bad, painful or joyful. So great art is about relationships. And that is why we're going to tackle that one next Friday. And how do you create a relationship? The exact same way that you use emotional preparation that I alluded to earlier, that when the door opens, when you see the person, when you speak to them on the phone, it elicits an inner life that is deep and imaginative and alive. And it's not faked, and you're not trying to show it, and you're not trying to act it. You are in it, in your feeling. You see, the great work of Sandy Meisner taught you to feel the things the character would feel, do the things the character would do, and you will be the character. This is different than just call me by the character's name. This is different than, well, my character took heroin, I'll try that out because I really want to know what that is. Oh, she's a prostitute. I'll explain to my boyfriend that I'll just be taking a little cash and it'll only be a one-time thing. Instead of actually doing things, you are in the reality of doing. And the reality of doing is imaginatively doing superlative activities and presetting the truthful, responsive, reactive emotion that would lead you to the action. Emotional preparation came up when I was first training. I had an actress, she's kind of famous, and I was teaching with the great Bill Esper. He was my acting teacher for 2 years, and then I went back and said I wanted to be a teacher, and he said, no, Joanne, you're going to be a famous actress, and you're touring with Whitney Houston's mother, and you're on Broadway, and you're on television, and I don't want you to, you'll make me more famous if you're in it. I said, no. I want a place to belong. I want stability. I want some place that I always can be. Acting is everything to me, but you don't always get a job, and you don't always get accepted, and I want a place that's a home. And when I started working with him, I remember that he was teaching me, and I said, I have a person you gave me in my class, and I don't think she can act. And he said, why not? And I said, well, she sort of stands there, and she's kind of not even responding. And this exercise, which we will get to in future Fridays, it's called repetition, which again, in some schools they do endlessly, but it's really only for the first 6 weeks of the training program. And that exercise is an answering and listening exercise that starts a conversational reality. And she wasn't very responsive. So I said to him, hey, Bill, maybe she has to be like, because I don't think that she is present and available and responsive and really connecting. And he said, I want you to wait till you introduce emotional preparation, the great Bill Esper. And she learned emotional preparation, and in one class, almost overnight, became a very successful world-renowned actress. Because once she was alive and she keyed into that emotion, it helped her imagination, it helped connect her to what was happening, and it freed her to live. I mean, a 25-year career later, multiple leads in TV series, enormous amounts of movies. So emotional preparation is a very key element in acting, but I want you to be clear. If you don't think you can cry, don't even take it as a sign of significant evaluation of your talent. There are actors who feel more. There are actors who feel less. The key is that you believe your imaginary circumstance and you can live an accident. How emotional you get, no one's going to come backstage and say, I counted the number of tears you had and I'm very disappointed. I'm going to bring back a bucket next time. If you don't cry through half the bucket, we're going to take your acting card away. Emotion has different levels for different people. Some people can cry at the drop of a hat and some people don't. It isn't the critical element of talent. The critical element of talent is imaginative connection to an experience. The ability to play pretend is the definition of talent. And that can be seduced further and further and further within a person's range. And the ability to live an accident publicly, a private accident, and living it publicly. It doesn't have to do with how emotional you get. But of course, how emotional you get is fun. It's fun to feel like, wow, I really had a good cry in that scene. I got that out. Oh, they did a close-up and I feel like I nailed it. On the other hand, if you're judging your emotion, worried about it, giving it an incremental report card, you're way off base. Because there are people you could think of right now who seem to be less deep or more deep, which is natural to their range. And you still love their acting. You still are fascinated by their natural realities. You're still loving their authenticity and believability. And American method actors, which is Meisner, have to deal with tension, physical tension, because the more emotional you get, the more your muscles are going to say, uh, 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 because you weren't raised, nobody's raised with a mom and dad that says, please, can you scream more? Your father and I really want you to have free emotional expression. So we'd like to hear a lot more screaming. You know what, darling? You're not crying hard enough. We would like to see a lot more tears. Honey, you're not laughing loud enough. No parent says, be louder, cry harder, scream, get angry. Your feelings are beautiful. People are trying to civilize you when they're raising you. So they say, honey, just relax. It'll be okay. That's intended to take the feeling away. Honey, I don't like to see you cry. That's because they don't want to feel their own feelings and have you feel them. Honey, if you yell like that, we're going to have to take away your allowance. Your grandmother has a heart condition. She's going to drop dead if you keep screaming. So we're not raised in a civilized society to have our emotions. But ballerinas aren't raised to be on their toes. And opera singers aren't raised to go singing through the night. But we as actors must reclaim our childbirth selves. That is the fun, the joy of taking that 6-week intensive, doing that improvisational work. Oh, what a thrill to finally have a place that is safe, that is encouraged, that can get you an Academy Award for just authentically having it all. But you must work in Alexander technique and in Lloyd Williamson movement classes and in things that help you to take your physicality into relaxation so that as you have the emotion coming over you, you do not push and tense against it out of the habit of not being comfortable with your feelings. And that's practice. Practicing emotionally preparing, practicing relaxing while emotions coming over you. And the more you do it, the deeper you'll get, the quicker you'll get emotional. Now, I'm going to take questions and I'm going to get them on my handy phone from my handy host who helps me. And anybody who has a question about emotional preparation, we have 10 more minutes. I want you to ask me anything at all. And something that the teachers can do with you. You know, we have artistics. I think they're like $25 or $30 an hour, which is like unheard of. You know, I mean, to coach with someone is $100 and I'm $500 an hour. I hope people don't want me to do it, so I make it as expensive as possible because I'd rather be available to a whole school than just for 1 or 2 people. So long story short, and I'm an actress and I'm writing my own screenplay, so I don't always have time to do it. But when you do an artistic, someone can actually watch you doing an emotional preparation and you can relax, lay down, and they can say, nope, you're tensing. Nope, you changed the subject. I can see that you're thinking, you're shifting. Nope, you're pushing, you're trying to direct it. You can practice emotionally preparing and have a teacher watch you and work on it to keep deepening. And sometimes you do the improvisational work and all of a sudden you're doing character interpretation and script analysis and you go, I don't know where that emotion came from. Suddenly in the course of a few months, I found that I was accessing feelings I didn't know I could. So I'm going to look and see if there's questions. Let's see. How can I better relate to accepting and believing my imaginary circumstances? You know what? How do you make yourself believe anything? Faith. When you think of this in Christianity, how do you know God's really up there? For sure. You take it on faith. What does it mean to take something on faith? It means to commit to believing for things that are not seen, for hopes that you want to be there. It helps you to be imaginative if you pick something that has great psychological interest for you. What if I did marry that girl? She's rich and gorgeous and brilliant. And then I can lure my imagination into the excitement because I find that girl attractive. You don't try to talk yourself into an imaginary circumstance that is not connecting you. The writer will write the circumstance, but you will do a daydream, and your daydream choice can be something that you know lures you into your imagination, seduces you, something you can't wait to take a dream down, emotional lane. Oh, I love to have that fantasy. That fantasy engages me. I can get lost in that fantasy. I'm at the movies, only I'm the star and it's internal. So work from things that really engage and interest you, and go on a fishing expedition to poke around and see what those things are. You know what they are when you actually go to a movie and you start crying in Ordinary People. Why am I so engaged by this movie? Because your mother rejected you. And maybe you never really thought about it till you saw that film. How do you draw emotion for a relationship you need to have if you're heartbroken? How do you emotionally prepare that feeling without reliving the real situation? Well, I wouldn't relive the real situation. Stella Adler, the great and brilliant Stella Adler, who has a perfect marriage in her aspirations and in her ideology and in her approach, is Meisner. They're a great team. Stella tells you about interpreting material, and Meisner shows you how, one step at a time. She divorced the great Harold Clurman, who I had the privilege of being in an acting class on an occasion, one of the heads of the group theater. And in her divorce, she was so heartbroken, she couldn't work from anything that was a breakup. Don't work from something that is heartbreaking. You have a scene, and the scene is about breaking up. Do a daydream about losing your favorite dog. Stay away from literal parallels in your imaginary world. Keep yourself healthy. Don't keep rewounding yourself saying, well, I really feel terrible about this breakup. I'll keep it alive in me for the next 2 years. Forget it. When you're imagining and emotionalizing, pull yourself into something that equally emotionalizes you, but is not literally the same. Do not keep rewounding yourself. Is emotional preparation interchangeable with substitution? No, substitution is another approach by Strasberg. I was in the actor's studio with the great Ilya Kazan, who directed Marlon Brando in On the Waterfront. And he said, you know, there's something about the work here that is sort of emotional, but we need the Meisner work. He said this. He said, we need Stella's work and Meisner's work because we need to be articulate and specific and take an audience through, not just sort of emotional. Substitution means I'm looking at you, but I'm thinking of my cousin. Substitution means I'm looking at you in the scene, but I'm thinking of my grandfather. The problem with substitution is it takes you out of being present, and it might give you a sort of distant, you know, disassociation. But that is not the same as emotional preparation. It might make you emotional to think you're looking at me and I'm your horrible stepmother. But just because something makes you emotional doesn't mean it's in good quality, or it isn't distracting you from the imaginary circumstance, or it isn't making you less present. Just being emotional, I'll punch you in the face. Oh, you're emotional. Good. Academy Award. Not so. There are movies where people are crying from start to finish, and you just go, really? Really? And you feel that they're just trying to cry. Remember, people try not to cry. Actors try to cry. So less is more. And it's always about relaxation. So you could have very little feeling and be really imaginatively connected to the truth and be very affecting. It's 1:54. Let's see if we have some more questions. I suggest you practice emotional preparation on a daily basis by getting up in the morning and not getting out of bed if you're happy until you're crying. And if you're crying, not till you're happy. And throughout the day, taking a half an hour, 40 minutes to work on different daydreams. And then before you go to sleep at night, what's your mood now? Change it. Practice, practice, practice. And work with Michael Frederick on Alexander techniques so that you know how the body should be. And keep letting your body relax, loosen, and practice, practice, practice. Let's see. Because practice will make it natural and organic, and slowly but surely what takes you 10 minutes will take you 5 minutes, will take you 2 minutes, will take you 30 seconds. What were the 2 movement techniques you talked about? Alexander technique. We have the premier Alexander technique teacher who's going into classes now. That's a good color. Another Zoom positive. I can see color. Michael Frederick. He is LA's premier Alexander technique teacher, and he's coming into classes now, and he is giving classes now, and he's wildly generously helping people to be able to do class. working with them in extraordinary ways. We also going to have a world-renowned speech and voice teacher. Alexander technique. And then there is a technique that I studied in New York with William Esper with a fellow named Lloyd Williamson. And Lloyd Williamson worked out a movement technique that was complementary with the Meisner technique. But there are other techniques. We really lean into Michael Frederick and his work because we find it's exceptional. But there are many things online now. Many things. Just as Baron Brown students now can watch all of the classes that are at the point of their training. And maybe online classes allows you to audit 5 classes a week, whereas if you were at the studio in person, you couldn't watch more than your own. There's so many attributes of what is an opportunity, as the Buddhists say, that is the same name for crisis. Let's see if there's any other questions. We've got 4 more minutes. Can you give advice on finding your thematic core and incorporating that into your emotional preparation work? Yes, I think that you should take a research lane down emotional, riverbanks. You're looking at yourself, and most people are living, but there's a sort of unawareness of what makes them tick. Most people spend their lives saying, she's wrong, and I didn't like her, and they made a mistake, and I'm a victim, and they made everything terrible, and you can't trust anyone. But very few people look at themselves and say, I created that. And I didn't understand that I had been doing that for years. And is this why no boyfriends ever lasted? It's not because they're all jerks, but I drove them away. Knowing yourself is the joy of being an artist. And very few people really live that way. Most people live in a kind of comatose state, looking at the world, projecting the movie of their childhood onto it. But actors must be more aware, must be more introspective, must be more courageous and heroic. And we must ask ourselves, what makes us tick? Who are we? And that's the joy of that 6 weeks and the continuing work from it, that even people who don't go on to act say is the most transformative thing they ever did in their life. It's thrilling. I wish I could give it to myself and do it again. The work of going places and asking yourself, what did make you cry? Why did you react so badly to that disagreement with your girlfriend? Why are you overreacting? Asking yourself therapeutically, exploratorily, looking for the themes that make you tick and turning on the openness to allow yourself to understand. When people are shut down and in denial and blaming the world for all activities and actions, they never get to see what as an artist they can use. The palette that you are working from, some people would call fertilizer, or another word, I don't swear, S, and it ends in T. But the fertilizer of your pain makes a beautiful garden for your art. And you must have the courage and joy of exploring your emotional identity in truth, relaxation, and acceptance, and use it to fill up and fuel the clarity of your actions. Well, guys, I will just say once more, what fun. If you guys have questions that were not answered, please continue to send them to the studio at info@baronbrown.com. And if you're a total stranger to the studio and you want to jump aboard the upcoming April class, or you want to jump aboard the upcoming May class, or if you want to talk about the summer enrollment that is coming down in July and August, when I suspect it will be a combo of people online and people in person. And if you want to tune in next Friday, we are going to do the exciting, delightful relationships. That is the key in all great acting. I hope you're getting a lot out of this. Questions that you have will be answered. We may do an entire day where I just answer questions that weren't answered and try to give guidance on emotional preparation and on relationships and on superlative activities, and keep feeding your fire. Because though we are not physically together, we are profoundly connected. And our art is the bridge that makes us rise. Keep rising out there. New people, current people, industry people, we love you, your support. in giving us the opportunities to do what we love. There's nothing greater than me getting a phone call saying, you got a job. We all love the art, and we love the people who support and give us the opportunity. So this is for everybody. Anybody can tune in. I'll see you next Friday. God bless. Remember, we rise.